Her name has been whispered for centuries, sometimes in reverence, sometimes in scandal, often in misunderstanding. She stood at the cross when others fled. She was the first to see the risen Christ, and yet her voice was almost lost to history, until fragments of an ancient book revealed her side of the story. This is not the Mary Magdalene you think you know. This is her gospel, the vision she saw, the words he spoke to her alone, and the message powerful enough to challenge even the boldest of the apostles. The city of Jerusalem still bore the echo of Passover crowds, but now it was different, quieter, tense, almost holding its breath. The shouts that had once welcomed Jesus with palm branches had long since turned into cries of "Crucify him," and the sound of the hammer against wood still haunted the minds of his followers. The streets were dangerous for anyone known to be close to him. Roman soldiers kept watch from the fortress of Antonia, their armor flashing in the midday sun, eyes scanning the people for the smallest hint of unrest. The temple priests carried themselves with the satisfaction of men who believed they had defended a tradition from a dangerous disruptor, and yet rumors spread in hushed tones through the city. Rumors of an empty tomb, of strange appearances, of whispers that the teacher was not gone after all. In an upper room, hidden from the eyes of those who sought to stamp out his movement, the disciples gathered. The doors were barred. Oil lamps flickered low, their flames bending in the drafts that slipped through the cracks of the wooden shutters. Every creak of the floorboards, every footstep in the alley below, made someone glance toward the door in fear. Mary of Magdala sat in the corner, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had been there at the cross when many had fled. She had been there at the tomb when others were too afraid to go. Her eyes carried the memory of both heartbreak and hope, for she had seen him alive again. But today, there was something different in the air. It was as if the room itself was waiting for something. The disciples spoke in whispers, Thomas asking John if the latest rumor was true, Andrew staring out the narrow window, Peter pacing the floor like a caged lion. And then, a light. It began softly, like the glow of dawn spilling through an unseen window. Then it grew brighter, not blinding but pure, filling the air with a warmth that chased away the cold shadow of fear. The room became still, the whispers silenced, and there he was. Jesus stood among them, not as he had looked on the road to Golgotha, broken and bleeding, but alive, strong, radiant with a quiet authority that silenced every doubt. The wounds were still there, but now they seemed like marks of victory rather than defeat. No one moved at first. Then, as though drawn by an unseen force, Mary rose to her feet, her eyes fixed on him. Peter stopped pacing, John straightened, and even Thomas, always skeptical, leaned forward, his hands trembling. Jesus looked at them with the gaze of a shepherd who knows each sheep by name. His voice, when he spoke, was soft yet carried to every corner of the room. "Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. The time is short, but what I tell you now will strengthen you for what lies ahead." The disciples leaned in, drinking in every word. All things, all forms, all creatures are bound together. Nothing exists apart from the source, and all must return to it. The Son of Man is not only among you, he is within you. Seek him there, and you will find the life that cannot be taken away. His eyes moved from face to face, resting briefly on Mary before continuing. "Do not add to the words I have given you. Do not burden yourselves or others with laws and chains as the lawgivers do. The kingdom is not built on such things. It is born in the heart. You are free. Live as those who are free." Peter's brow furrowed slightly. He had spent his life within the framework of the law. To set it aside entirely felt like trying to walk on water again. But Jesus pressed on. "The path will not be easy. They will hate you for my name. They will twist your words, doubt your witness, and try to silence your voices. But be of good courage. What I have planted in you will bear fruit, even if you do not see it with your eyes." Mary could feel the weight of his words. They were not just instructions. They were a mantle, a calling that would cost each of them dearly. He stepped closer to them, and though he spoke to all, his voice seemed to reach the core of each one's soul. Go now. Preach the good news to every creature. Speak what you have heard and seen, and let nothing turn you back. Where your mind is, there will your treasure be also. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, the light around him began to fade. His image softened, like mist dissolving in the morning sun, and in an instant, he was gone. In the silence that followed, no one spoke. The air was heavy, not with fear this time, but with the enormity of what they had just been told. The call was clear, but the cost was clearer still. And that is when the doubts began to creep in. The room felt emptier than before. The glow of his presence had been replaced by the dim flicker of oil lamps, their flames shivering in the still air. Peter leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, staring at the ground as if the answers might appear in the cracks of the stone floor. Andrew rubbed his palms together, his jaw tense. Matthew kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to burst open with soldiers. It was John who finally spoke, his voice low. He's gone. The words felt heavier than they should have. He had been gone before, at the tomb between appearances. But this time it felt final, like the last echo of a bell fading into silence. Thomas shook his head. Gone, and he tells us to preach in the open. You saw what they did to him. Do you think they will spare us? Andrew added quickly. And who will listen to us? We are fishermen, tax collectors, zealots. Not priests, not scholars. The Sanhedrin will crush us before we take the first step. One by one, voices joined in, the doubts spilling out like water breaking through a dam. If the people rejected him, how will they receive us? What will become of our families? What if they find where we are hiding? The air grew thick with fear, and the hope from moments ago began to wilt under the weight of uncertainty. In the corner, Mary of Magdala had been silent, her hands resting on her knees, her gaze steady on each man as they spoke. She had heard this before, the language of fear. She had seen it in their eyes when the soldiers came for him in Gethsemane. She had seen it when they scattered at Golgotha. But she had also seen something else, the empty tomb, the risen Lord calling her by name, the quiet certainty in his eyes when he sent her to tell the others. Mary rose slowly. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying the kind of authority that comes not from position, but from conviction. Brothers, do not let your hearts be choked by fear. Have you forgotten what he said to us? That his presence would remain with us? That nothing could snatch us from his hand? She stepped toward them, the hem of her robe brushing the floor. When I went to the tomb that morning, I did not find him where I expected. But I found him, and he called me by name. He is not bound by death, nor by walls, nor by the power of rulers. His grace is with us still. If we believe that, truly believe it, then what can man do to us? Her words fell into the silence, and for a moment, the fear loosened its grip. John lowered his head, remembering the moment when she had burst into the room that first morning, breathless with the news, I have seen the Lord. Peter, still leaning against the wall, lifted his eyes to her. There was something in his gaze, curiosity, perhaps even respect, though it was laced with a certain hesitation. Sister, he began slowly, we all know the teacher loved you more than the rest of us. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Peter was not one to speak so plainly of such things. Tell us, he continued, the words you remember, the things he told you that we have not heard. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. If he spoke to her alone, how will we know it is from him? Peter glanced at Andrew but returned his eyes to Mary. Still, I would hear it. We have his words in our hearts, but perhaps she has something more, something we need. Mary's gaze moved from Peter to the rest of the room. I will tell you what he said to me, not to lift myself above you, but so that you may be strengthened. She took a breath, steadying her thoughts. One day, after he had spoken to you, I saw him in a vision. He stood before me, not in the flesh, but in a light so pure it made the sun seem pale. I said to him, Lord, I saw you today in a vision. And he answered, Blessed are you for not wavering at what you see. Where the mind is, there is the treasure. The room was silent now, the earlier murmurs of fear gone. Mary's voice softened, but her words carried an urgency. He showed me the path of the soul after it leaves the body, the journey that every one of us must take, and he showed me the enemies that will try to stop it. Peter leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. Enemies? Mary nodded. Yes, not of flesh and blood, but of spirit. I will tell you what I saw. At this point, the oil lamps burned low, shadows dancing on the walls as if leaning in to hear her words. Every ear in the room strained toward her voice, because whatever she was about to say, it was not in the teachings they had all heard together. It was something only she had been given. The oil lamps sputtered softly, their flames bowing low, as if in reverence to what was about to be spoken. The room felt smaller, as though the walls had leaned in closer to catch each word from Mary's lips. She stood at the center, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze not fixed on anyone in particular, but somewhere beyond the walls, as if she were looking at something only she could see. When the Lord appeared to me in that vision, she began, He did not speak as one speaking to the ears, but as one who speaks directly to the heart. His words were not sounds, yet I understood them as clearly as if they had been carved into my soul. He showed me a soul, my soul, though it was without the weight of flesh. It rose upward, leaving the world behind. I could see the earth below, its mountains, rivers, cities, and all the lives bustling within it, growing smaller and smaller as I ascended. Her voice deepened slightly, drawing them in, but the path was not clear. The soul was not alone. There were powers, ancient unseen rulers of the world's darkness, waiting along the way. Each sought to hold the soul captive, to pull it back into the shadow from which it had come. The first power was called darkness. It rose before me like a wall of black stone, so high and wide that it seemed to have no end. Its voice was a wind that chilled the marrow. Where do you think you are going? You are bound to me. You have lived in my shadow since you first drew breath. You will not escape me. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The soul answered, I was bound to you once, but I am bound no longer. For the one who is light has broken your chains. Mary's hands, which had been still, now moved slightly, as though illustrating the soul stepping past the barrier. And darkness, having nothing left to cling to, fell away behind me like a shadow at sunrise. Mary's tone shifted, softer but edged with tension. The soul came next to the power called desire. She was not like darkness, no cold wall, no weight, but a figure clothed in beauty, her voice sweet and inviting. She said, I did not see you descend, but now I see you rise. You belong to me. I have dressed you in longing since your youth. Come back to me and I will clothe you again. A faint, almost ironic smile touched Mary's lips. The soul replied, I have known you, but I no longer need you. Your garments are heavy, and I have shed them. I am going to the place where nothing fades. She lifted her chin slightly, and desire's beauty withered. Her voice turned to dust, and she was gone. The lamplight flickered, and Mary's shadow stretched tall behind her. The third was called ignorance. It came not as a figure, but as a cloud, thick and suffocating, wrapping itself around the soul so that it could see nothing ahead. It whispered, Where are you going? You are nothing. You have no worth, no strength, no place beyond this. Mary's voice grew firm. But the soul answered, What binds me has been slain, what turns me is no more. I come from the Holy One and I return to Him. You have no power over me. At those words the cloud broke apart, and ignorance was scattered like mist before the sun. Mary's voice dropped lower now, almost a whisper, and the disciples leaned in. The last and greatest was wrath. It came as a fire, fierce, consuming, and roaring like a storm. It hurled accusations at the soul. You have failed. You have sinned. You have no right to ascend. Turn back before you are destroyed. She took a slow breath before continuing. But the soul answered, I am not yours. I was from the beginning, and I return to the beginning. My sins are forgiven. My chains are broken, and my life is hidden in the one who sent me. Wrath screamed, but it could not touch me. The fire became only light, and I passed through it unharmed. Mary's voice softened as though describing the end of a long journey, and then there was nothing to stop me. No darkness, no desire, no ignorance, no wrath. Only light. Light so vast and gentle that it seemed to hold all things within itself. I knew then that the soul has no death, only a return, and in that place there is rest beyond rest, peace beyond peace. She paused, the memory of the vision still alive in her eyes. This is what he showed me. This is what awaits all who are set free by him. When she fell silent, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. The disciples stared at her, some with wonder, others with unease. For in her words they had heard something deep and strange, a teaching that was not in the streets of Jerusalem, nor in the scrolls of the temple. And for some, that was a truth too sharp to hold without question. The room was still for a heartbeat after Mary's words faded. The oil lamps hummed quietly, their light flickering against the stone walls. Some disciples kept their eyes lowered, as if absorbing the weight of what they had just heard. Others looked at Mary with a mix of awe and uncertainty. Andrew was the first to break the silence. His voice was careful, but there was a note of skepticism beneath it. Sister, these are strange words. Beautiful, yes, but unlike the things he spoke to us in the open, they sound different. Mary did not flinch, but her gaze softened toward him. Different is not false, Andrew. Did not the teacher himself say there were things we could not yet bear to hear, that the Spirit would reveal them in time? Andrew shifted, rubbing his beard. Perhaps, but I wonder if the others will believe such things, and if we speak them, will they not think we invent them to set ourselves above them? A murmur rippled through the group. The fear that had briefly faded now crept back into the edges of the room. Peter stepped forward, his face shadowed by the lamp behind him. His voice was stronger than Andrew's, tinged with the boldness and stubbornness for which he was known. Mary, did he truly speak with you alone, apart from us? Did he reveal to you things he kept from his chosen apostles? And if he did, why? Why not tell us all together? The air tightened. Mary met his eyes. Peter, you know as well as I do that the Lord chose each of us for different reasons, and he gave to each what they were ready to receive. Would you question him for giving me a gift? Peter's jaw clenched. A gift, perhaps, but if he gave you more than us, does that not mean he preferred you above the rest of us? The question cut deep, not because it was true, but because of the sharpness with which it was asked. Mary's breath caught, and for the first time since she began speaking, her voice wavered. Do you think I have made this up in my heart? Do you think I would place words in the mouth of our Lord to exalt myself? Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. She turned her face slightly away, not to hide her tears, but to keep her composure. I have followed him as you have. I have left my life behind as you have. I stood at the cross when others fled, and now I share what he showed me, not for my sake but for yours, that your faith might be strengthened. Her voice broke. But if even you will not believe me, a firm voice cut through the tension. It was Levi, also called Matthew. His eyes locked on Peter. Brother, you have always been quick to speak and slow to listen. If the Savior made her worthy to receive these things, who are you to reject her? Do you not remember that he rebuked us when we argued over who is greatest? He stepped forward, his tone growing sharper. You say the teacher loved her more than us. Perhaps he did, for she understood him when we did not. That is no shame to us, unless we let envy blind our eyes." Levi turned to the others. "If we begin our mission with strife, how will we bear the weight of the journey ahead? Did he not send us out to preach the good news, all of us, each with the measure we were given?" The room was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. The sharp edge of tension was softening into something else, not full agreement, but a truce forged in the knowledge that their calling was bigger than their pride. Peter exhaled slowly, his shoulders lowering. "Perhaps I was too quick to speak. Sister, I will not stand in the way of what the Lord has placed in you. May his word be proven in the work we do together." Mary nodded, her tears now drying on her cheeks. "Then let us not delay. The world waits for what we have been given." Levi placed his hand on Peter's shoulder. "Let us go forth, then, not as rivals, but as brothers and sisters in the same mission." One by one they gathered their cloaks, their sandals, their few possessions. The lamps were snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint silver of moonlight slipping through the shutters. They unbarred the door and stepped into the narrow streets. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. They did not know where the next road would lead, nor how long they would walk it together. But they went, into the night, into the world, carrying a message that would change it forever. And at the center of it, though the world would not always remember, was the voice of a woman who had seen the Lord. The days after that meeting were filled with movement, cautious, quiet, but relentless. The disciples went in small groups, some north toward Galilee, others deeper into Judea, speaking in marketplaces and courtyards, in whispers over shared bread, in urgent words to those who hungered for hope. Mary did not stay behind. In the narrow streets of Jerusalem, she walked with her head uncovered, her eyes clear and unafraid. She spoke not with the authority of the temple, nor the learning of the scribes, but with the certainty of one who had seen the Lord and heard his voice. In courtyards, women drew near to her, some curious, others desperate for a word of life. She told them of the empty tomb, of his words in the garden, of the light that shone when all hope seemed lost. And sometimes when she saw that the listener's heart was ready, she told them of the soul's journey, of the chains it must break, the shadows it must leave behind, and the light that awaited at the end. It did not take long for whispers to turn to resistance. Some of the religious leaders heard of her teaching and dismissed her with a scoff. A woman speaking of the things of God? Blasphemy. Let the men teach. That is the way of the fathers. Others were more subtle, twisting her words, saying she claimed too much, that she sought to make herself greater than the apostles. But Mary did not waver. She remembered his words, "Do not be afraid." One evening, as the sky turned red over the rooftops, Peter found her by the well outside the city. "You have been busy," he said with a faint smile. Mary looked up from the rope in her hands. "So have you. I hear your voice has been stirring many in the markets." Peter hesitated before speaking again. "Mary, I spoke harshly that day. I doubted what I should have trusted. I thought perhaps the Lord's favor for you diminished my own place. I was wrong." Mary's expression softened. "We are all learning, Peter. Even now I think of his words, that the greatest among us must be the servant of all." Peter nodded. "Then let us both serve, in different ways perhaps, but with the same heart." In time, Mary's path took her beyond the city. Some say she traveled north to Galilee. Others whisper she went west across the sea, carrying the message to those who had never heard his name. Everywhere she went, she spoke of the kingdom not as a place to be built with stone, but as a life born within the soul. She taught that the journey of faith was not without struggle, that one must face darkness, desire, ignorance, and wrath, but that each could be overcome by the one who had conquered death. Years later, when her hair had turned silver and her steps had grown slower, she was asked by a young believer, "Mary, after all you have seen, what is the greatest truth the Lord gave you?" She smiled, her eyes bright with the memory of that garden morning and the vision that had changed her life. That nothing in this world can hold the soul that belongs to Him. Not chains, not fear, not death itself. The journey may be long and the enemies fierce, but in the end, there is only light. And in that light, we are home. The sea stretched before her, calm under the setting sun. She stood at the edge of the shore, the wind tugging at her cloak, the waves breaking softly at her feet. Somewhere behind her, others were taking up the work. Peter in Rome, John in Ephesus, Thomas in lands far to the east. The paths were different, but the calling was the same. She lifted her eyes to the horizon. The light was fading from the sky, but in her heart it had never dimmed. And though the world might forget, heaven remembered the voice of Mary of Magdala, the woman who had seen the Lord and who had refused to be silent. Her steps faded into history, but her voice still echoes across the ages, the voice of a woman who saw the risen Lord, who carried His words when others doubted, and who walked into the world unafraid. The Gospel of Mary is more than a fragment of parchment. It is a reminder that truth cannot be silenced, light cannot be hidden, and the kingdom is not bound by walls, titles, or fear. The question is, will we, like Mary, carry the message forward?